Okay, well, today I'm here with Nicole, my friend, and we're just going to have a conversation about shame. And, one, because, we've both had some experience with feeling shame in our lives, just a little, and we've had lots of conversations from the two of us about it before, and so I just thought it'd be cool for us to take a little bit of time this morning and just kind of talk about some of our lived experiences, also some things that we've been able to put into practice to help get ourselves free from the effects of shame. And so, we're just going to go through and discuss some questions, and hopefully this is helpful for you. And for all of you watching too, feel free in the comments or in the chat, in the comments, like we're like YouTubers, like just in the comments, tell us. But in the chat, you can feel free to, if you have any experiences you want to share, or any questions, or any, just perspectives that you might have on this. And then after at the end, after the recording, when we come back live, we can talk about those things. So, Nicole, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
We're going to super try to be serious because, it's like, you have those friends where you really shouldn't go to serious things with. That's kind of where we're at, but it's fine.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. It'll be great. Okay, so first I thought maybe we could each take a few minutes and just talk about some of our own personal experiences with shame, like times in our life that we have felt shame, maybe what that shame was around, and just to talk about the effects of that and how that can negatively impact our life when we feel that. So
cool.
Would you like to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
My experience with shame. I mean, I feel like I've experienced shame on a ton of levels. Whether it's shame about my body or my am I smart enough? Am I, the list is so long. I think especially growing up in a purity culture, church culture, shame about my thoughts, which is kind of crazy because it wouldn't be things that I was thinking, overly thinking on or anything. Just a thought would come in and it would just totally derail. I'm a horrible person, and it's just what?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Well, I was thinking about that too, how I was listening to Brene Brown, which we'll in the chat and stuff, we'll link to all the things. Yeah, she's a researcher, and she's done a ton of research around the idea of shame. But I was listening to a podcast recently where she was talking about it, and how the way that what shame does is it tells you that you are bad.
Yes.
As a person, as opposed to oh, I did something bad, or I messed up and did something wrong. But shame tells you that you are wrong and you are bad. And so I think that, my experience was the same. I think, growing up, I think a lot of times when you grow up in a real religious environment, when you grow up in church, oftentimes as humans, we have a really difficult time, in the church, there's at least the churches I was always a part of, it was there were certain behaviors that were unacceptable. There was a certain standard to which you were expected to live up to. And so I think what happens is, because shame is really effective, it gets you to behave the way that people want you to behave.
Yeah, fear and shame, always.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. Yeah. And so I think that's why a lot of times in churches, and even in, I think parents do it to their children a lot. I think that, if you're, maybe you are a boss or you have people that are underneath you, I think a lot of times we kind of resort to using shame as a tool to get a desired outcome of behavior. But the problem is what that does is you might for a time get the desired behavior that you want, but the damage that's happening to a person's soul in the process, and I can remember, it was like I no longer knew how to separate I did something bad and I am bad.
Yes.
Like that was the messaging that I remember getting for most of my life from church spaces, was that, you are a terrible, horrible, dirty sinner. and you you have to not do these certain things in order to be accepted by God. And so, but what that does is it's like I could no longer separate those things. It was like, oh, I had this thought, or I did this thing, or I whatever, and it was suddenly no longer, oh, I did something that was wrong, but it was I am wrong. I'm a bad Christian. I'm a bad person. And so it was like I don't think I realized how much it really controlled my life until more recently. I think as I started to deconstruct some of those ideologies and those things, started to realize how detrimental it had actually been, to me.
I think I lived at least 25 years in a shame spiral, for sure. And that's what I think shame does, is it just keeps you on this loop, because you can't move forward when you're bad. Like when you think that everything about you is wrong, how do you move forward from that? And when your belief, or at least my belief of God, was that I have to do all of these things, but I can't ever nail it. I'm always like missing the mark. And yes, but there's Jesus, but then I'm still missing the mark, even if I know Jesus. It was like, I can't win. And if I can't win, then screw it. I keep messing up, and then I feel bad, and it's meant to keep you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also, I was thinking about this just this morning too, is how dehumanizing shame is. Because there are things that, I would think, or that I would do, or I would have these emotions, or I would, feel certain ways, and all of it was in reality just part of the human experience. It's just part of being human. But I think there were a lot of ways in which it was almost like the expectation was to be superhuman, especially, and obviously today we're going to really focus on the context of being in the church, because this is a church, and that's just kind of what, that's what we're talking about today. But I think the expectation that I always got was, it was like you were supposed to be this pure, holy, set apart, do everything you could to not sin. And that was how you were a good Christian. And so what that did was it removed my humanity, and it made me feel shame around things that were just part of the human experience. Particularly as a teenager or a young adult, it was like purity culture, and don't even, sex is dirty, bad, ugly, gross. Don't ever think about it. So it was like, if I ever had a desire for that, or was attracted to someone, or wanted to make out with someone, or anything like that, God forbid, in that moment, it was like, that was a very human response, a very human emotion and feeling. But then because of the messaging I was that was bad, that was evil, you can't do that, you're going to cause people to stumble, cover up your body because you have to protect the boys, and I think because of that, it removed my humanity, and I felt very dehumanized. And I didn't, up until recently, it was like I kind of had to learn how to embrace my full humanity, because I feel like that was something that was separated from me for such a long time.
Yeah. I think it's not only dehumanizing, but it's also you become very disembodied. I did.
Yeah.
You can't be in your body because your body is bad. Because it's either causing you to stumble or causing someone else to stumble. You can't. So it's like, well, then I'm just going to detach from all of it.
Right.
And which in and of itself, you can ignore physical pain that you're in because of it. It's just like so many things become broken because of shame.
Yeah. It's just so like insidious,
Yes.
Because I think sometimes too it's we sometimes don't fully understand how to name it, and I think until we name it, you won't be able to actually kind of move beyond it, and sometimes we conflate feeling guilty for something, with shame. And I think there's a difference between, again, guilt says, oh, I did something wrong, and shame says, you are wrong as a person,
Like, guilt is a tool. Like, for me, at least now, I'm able to recognize, like, oh, I did this thing. I don't like how it made me feel or how I made someone else feel. And then it's like just a check of like, okay, let me just reevaluate. Shame is a prison. Like, you're just there. And you're, there's no... I think people like to pair guilt and shame, but they are very different. And one helps you move forward, and one literally can destroy your life. Because shame, if you feel shame, you want to invite other people into that shame. At least I did. Like, and I can feel myself, like, now when it comes up or when I am in a situation, which is rare now, thank God. But I can look back at things that I've done in the past, and out of my own shame, I shamed other people because you have to pull people in, because it's like such this heavy, like, painful thing that it's like, well, if I have to sit at the table with this thing, I want everybody else to sit there with me.
Yeah, it's almost, it's like you don't want to be in it alone because it feels terrible. And so I think sometimes too, it's like we kind of put up this defense mechanism of wanting to deflect that shame off of ourselves. It's like, well, if we can make somebody else feel...
Well, look what they did.
Then it takes the attention off of us and what we have done, and maybe helps alleviate a little bit of that feeling of that shame, because it really is. It definitely is a prison. It really, really is. Brene Brown, she gives the definition of shame, which it's kind of like based on her, decades of research. They kind of compiled this definition, and she says that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. But then what's interesting is that she talks about how we are all wired for connection, love, and belonging. So when we have this feeling that we are unworthy of the very thing that we're wired for, I was like, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, like that really is why shame is so destructive, is that it's telling us that we are inherently unworthy of things that we actually were wired for from the beginning.
Right. It's so opposite of the gospel, But yet, it's so intertwined in most church cultures that I've experienced,
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that there's so, like, that we find that churches can be such a breeding ground for shame? What do you think? Because I don't want to sit on here and say that every single Christian or every single pastor or church is intentionally trying to fill people with shame. I don't think that was necessarily the intent. I think sometimes it is.
Sure.
So why do you think that churches can be such a breeding ground for shame?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think it's the intention. And when I can look back at, like, different organizations or things that I was a part of in the church world, I am now having some more grace about it. I think towards the beginning it was just angry, but I'm starting to see that, like I said earlier, when you feel shame, I think it's almost natural to pull other people into that. And So if you're given this narrative that God is this guy in the sky that is pretty much angry with your existence all the time, you know, if that's what you're given, that automatically disconnects you from worthiness and from love and from community and connection. So if that's the case, then you're living in shame, and the God that is supposed to love you is actually just giving you shame, you know? And so, which I, from my experience in that, like, culture, and not all my church experience has been that, but the ones that I've seen or been a part of, I think when that's your understanding of God, then it's almost just a natural response to instead of inviting people into love and being human and making mistakes, to shame them, because it keeps you there. It's almost why you're there, because well, if I can just maybe be good enough, then God will love me, you know? And, but then you tell these people, you're not good enough. You know, it's like the chain of like, okay, if I'm not good enough, you somehow heard that from God. So then you're going to tell the people that they're not good enough, you know, which is like, it's not true.
It's not true. We talked about this last week. Like, everyone is beloved and so loved inherently. Like, that is just who we are, as we are so loved. But, and I think too, like, and again, when your framework and your starting point is that you are terrible, horrible, no good, and God is holy and righteous and pure and can't stand to be around you. So that God had to, you know, kill Jesus so that God could handle being near you. When that's our framework, and we focus so much on this idea of us being just sinful and gross and dirty and terrible, when that's our starting point, and then it's almost like, I think what happens is, in our human minds, the only way we can get beyond that is to change our behavior, to have like a behavior that lines up with what's considered good and righteous and pure behavior. And so I think a lot of times we use shame as a means of control. I think the church is trying to control people's behavior. And so if we can make people feel bad enough about the things they're doing that we think aren't lining up with whatever they should be doing as a Christian, and if we can make them feel shame, I mean think about it, like when you were a kid, or like when I even think about parenting my own kids, if I really wanted to get my kids to like do what I want them to do, shame would be a very effective way of doing that. Like I could shame my children, and I could do it in a way to where they wouldn't even necessarily know they were being shamed, but I could make them feel so bad that I could get the desired behavior for a time. But then what I'm doing is I'm robbing them of their humanity and dehumanizing them, and I'm not allowing them to like grow into these human beings capable of analyzing their emotions and moving through their emotions and making decisions that are healthy and whole, you know? And so I think sometimes that's it. It's like you said earlier, the fear and the shame. It's like we're afraid to let people be fully human because we're afraid of what might happen if we do. And so that starts the whole cycle, this whole like shame cycle, you know?
Yeah. It's also kind of lazy, you know? Like, for lack of a better word, I guess. Because like, shame there's no lesson in shame. There's nothing to learn there. You know, it's like, and instead, it's much better to have like a conversation with your kid or your spouse or whoever. Because I can think back too, just in like friendships and relationships of like, well, maybe this will get them to do what I want, you know? And it's like, no, it doesn't. It never does. Like, or yet for a time it might, but they're just doing it because they feel like crap. You know, like not because they want to, or, you know, like you've just made them feel like ants. And so they're like, okay, I guess I'll do what you want.
And they're afraid of losing, because like we also kind of dangle belonging. Yes. And that goes back to the whole, like, you know, we're wired for connection and belonging. What shame does is it tells you that you're unworthy of that belonging. But what we like to do is we like to dangle that belonging and say, yeah, you're unworthy of this belonging unless you change your behavior. Or if you do this differently, then, you know, and so it's like, because we're so afraid of losing our belonging, it's like whatever shame is being put on us, we take that and we then try to like change our behavior so that we don't lose that connection, you know? Yeah, I remember recently had like this experience of where, and you know, and we're in a second, I want us to talk a little bit about some ways that we've learned how to move through that shame and like use other tools that are actually helpful and healthy. But because I've done so much work around this over the past few years, it's been a while since I've like felt shame. And then recently I had an experience where I, you know, made some decisions that I was kind of second guessing. And I, you know, I made the best decision I knew to make with what I had in front of me in that moment. But then on the other side of it just felt like, oh my gosh, I didn't want anybody to know the decision that I had made, which was so weird. Like I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to tell any of my other closest friends. I didn't want to, like, it was like, but which is so ridiculous because like I know that I don't have to be afraid to like tell the people that love me these things. And I was actually talking to Dan about it, and he goes, he's like, I think like what you're telling me right now, I think what you're feeling is shame. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like I realized that I hadn't felt that in so long, and shame was telling me that you are bad. You didn't, not this, that you made a bad decision, but it was like, you're a bad parent, you're a bad person, you're a bad Christian, you're a bad pastor. And yeah, it fell so heavy on me, and I stopped and went, you know what, you're right. And I'm like, and what I'm feeling right now doesn't feel like love. This doesn't feel like what love would say or do. And so I, in that moment, was like, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. Yeah. I'm feeling shame, you know?
Yeah. It's very freeing once you become aware of what it feels like in your body to feel shame.
Yeah.
What it feels like to not feel shame, you know? Because I think since I can remember, I lived in shame and made decisions out of shame. And so, like, it was almost like I had to relearn, like, how to move without it.
Yeah.
And I think it's still a process, but like you said, I mean, I couldn't tell you. Actually, I could tell you the last time I felt it, and it wasn't even mine. Like, I think I was having I had done something, and I was having a conversation with a friend, and they, you know, gave me their opinions, and I was like, oh, yeah, you know, whatever. And then I got off the phone, and I was like, yeah, it's not for me. Like, you know, like, because I thought about it more, and my baseline now is basically like, does it cause harm to myself or others? And if not, move on, you know? And in that situation, it didn't. And I, you know, made, like you said, I made decisions, and I don't feel bad about that, you know? But like the conversation I was having kind of like made me feel like I should feel bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just don't, as soon as I could recognize, oh, this is shame, I was like, oh no, you can't sit at my table anymore. You know, like,
you are no longer welcome here.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's like shame no longer gets a seat.
No.
Like, it's just, it no longer gets to be even a part of the conversation anymore. Yeah. And you know, you kind of talked a little bit about, but I'd love now to talk about maybe a little bit more, what are some things that you've done to kind of set yourself free from that? Or like you talked a little bit about noticing how you feel in your body. Like, can you talk a little bit about that, about like what's your process for, first of all, for being able to recognize and name what it is, and then what are some things maybe that you do to help move yourself through that, to get out on the other side of it?
I think my process started with really undoing some toxic beliefs that I had about God. I think if you don't start there, I guess I can't say you can't move forward, but it's really hard if your idea of God is that he thinks that you're horrible, unworthy, unlovable, if not for, then you wouldn't make, if you don't believe God is love, I don't think you can move past shame.
Yeah.
No,
that's really good.
So I had to let go of a lot of things before being able to even recognize shame. Like, I think the letting go of shame came way later in the process of like, okay, well, what do I actually believe about God? If this gospel thing is real, then if God is really love, then it would make no sense for me to live in this like spiral.
Yeah.
And so now, like, I feel like I'm able to recognize it, like you said, where it was like, this isn't love. Yeah. So, like, whether it be loving towards myself or another person, because I think, old habits die hard. So, like, it's like, there are times where I'm like, if I'm in a situation and I'm embarrassed or feel bad or feel shame, it's like, well, I want them to feel that too. And then going back to like, first of all, is it causing harm to me or someone else? And second of all, is it love? And if it doesn't fall into that, it's probably fear or shame.
Yeah.
And if I can name that, then I can be like, okay, thanks for showing up, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
And I really have said that. Like, after that conversation that I had, I was like, what is this weird feel? Like, it's so weird now to like, for shame to feel foreign. But I was like, what is this? Like, you just feel gross, And I was just like, I don't know. And then I was like, hello, old friend. I was like, this is shame. Like, and I was feeling it from someone else, their own stuff, but I was just like, oh no, I literally in my mind was like, I don't do that anymore. Like, and I just moved on with my day, like, I'm not gonna, there's too much life to live, and I spent too much of my life thus far living, beating myself up, trying to make God love me, all these things that I'm just like, I don't have time for that. Like, if I only get whatever time, I'm going to live it. And you can't do that and have shame. Can't. Like, you cannot fully live life with shame in a backpack on you. Like, you just can't.
Yeah. No, that's so good. That's so good. Because it does. It corrodes everything. Everything. And it, and even like, and I'm not saying like, when I talk about, even when you were saying how the way that we see God is kind of the start of it, especially in a church kind of Christian context, is like, if the things that were, because for myself, most of the things that I felt shame over were things that I was taught were unacceptable if I was going to be a Christian, and so, but I think, reframing the way that we see God and then recognizing that it really does corrode everything. Like, it, in the long run, like, it may be effective for a little while, but in the long run, I think shame breeds violence. Like, it's, it kind of corrodes the belief that we can ever actually be better.
Yeah.
Like, because, obviously all of us have things that we want to be better about. So whether that's for us white folks, whether that's addressing, racism, if we notice that maybe we are, lashing out at people we love because we're really angry and haven't dealt with some of our own stuff, or if we notice that have fallen into some behaviors that are causing harm to ourselves or others. Obviously we all want to move forward toward wholeness, for ourselves and for everyone around us. So I'm not saying that like none of us have things to work on.
No,
but it's a matter of how we go about doing that. That when we are full of shame tells us that we will never be better than what we are right now.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like stops any kind of growth before it can even start.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember like doing things that were not at that time in my life, like the standard or whatever, or, like missing the mark, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then having a realization of like, well, I'm never going to hit the mark. So who cares?
Yeah.
And like, so then you keep doing, like I said earlier, you just keep doing the thing. Like, so it's just like, you can't win with shame. Like,
nope.
Not even kind of.
Nope. Yeah, it's just such a cycle, so you feel like you can never be better. So then you just kind of give up on trying to be better, but then you still feel shame around that behavior.
Yes.
So it's like, I think, it doesn't even work. Like it doesn't even ultimately get us the desired outcome.
Right.
That we want. It just continues this cycle.
Yeah. Which I don't know that it's intended to give you an outcome, like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just to kind of keep you bound.
Yeah.
It keeps you bound. And eventually, like I know for me, what shame did was eventually I just wasn't, I didn't embrace my full humanity. And so I did live a very disembodied life where it was like, I didn't even fully know who I was. I was scared of my desires.
Terrified.
I was scared of expressing certain emotions because I felt like that was bad to express those things. I was afraid to even say what I wanted or what I needed. It was like those things, I no longer even knew how to determine what those things were because the cycle of shame kept me in such almost like a weird sort of like zombie-like state, internally, where it was like I wasn't living. I wasn't really living. I was too afraid of doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, thinking the wrong thing, becoming the wrong thing, that I just quit living, and
I do know.
Yeah. You're like, I have been there. I do know.
Yeah.
And I just think when I think about, God, and when I think about God being love, like love doesn't want us to not embrace our full humanity. Love doesn't want us to continue in this cycle that's keeping us bound. Like love wants us to be free.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, and I want to talk a little bit about, just to kind of clarify, I think sometimes part of the problem around shame is sometimes we will call things shame that aren't actually shame, that is actually like accountability. Yeah. So I want to be clear that, again, we obviously want to continue to move towards individual wholeness and to health and wholeness for all. Like our liberation is all bound up with one another. So we want liberation for all, which means addressing behaviors that we may be doing that could be causing harm or that aren't, that aren't interested in liberation for all, And so, what do you think are some ways that we can pursue accountability for things and still recognize that, yeah, there are certain behaviors and certain things that we might be doing that aren't in our best interest and that aren't in the best interest of others. So how do we pursue accountability but not fall into that shame cycle?
I think having people in your life that can be honest with you, but also come from a place of love. If I know that you love me and that you're for me, I can bring something to you, and I know you're not going to shame me, back into my hole. And I think too, like, there is a difference of, again, guilt and shame. Like, if you have harmed someone and they tell you, hey, you have caused harm to me, you can't be like, you're shaming me.
Yeah.
Like, that, what?
Even if they don't say it in the way that you think they should say it, like,
yes.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you're being shamed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you can move forward through, like, okay, I did this. Shame doesn't allow you to take ownership. I don't think.
Yeah, no.
Because if you owned it, then you could move forward. But I think a lot of times shame tells you, hey, hide this thing that you did.
Yeah.
Which then there's no accountability.
Right.
Or it says, like, well, they also did it, so, so then it's blame shifting. Again, you can't be accountable in that way. Like, so I think that in order to be accountable, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be able to, allow people to tell you when you've, caused harm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really, really good. And you're right. It doesn't, you don't own up to it when you're feeling shame, because shame says hide it, hide it.
Because you don't want to lose your tribe. You don't want to feel unloved, even though you probably already do feel unloved.
Right.
When you're in that cycle.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. Yeah. Yeah. I just think, I know for me, as far as like moving forward, kind of breaking out of that cycle of shame and getting free, I think a huge part of it is learning how to name it for what it is, because it's like, just like with anything, when something is brought into the light, it loses its power. And I think that's how shame is too. It's like when we can recognize it and we learn what we're feeling in our body, when we learn the certain thoughts that we're having, like to be able to tie that to, okay, is this what I'm feeling is shame. And the thing is too, like, we might feel shame. There might be something that we genuinely do need to change, and we feel shame around that. So then I think the answer isn't to just say, oh, well, that's shame, so that means that thing that I did, like, I don't have to worry about it. It's like, no, we can teach ourselves how to move through shame to go, okay, so I did something that caused harm. I did something that I would say is wrong.
Or that I wouldn't want to do again. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I am wrong or I am bad or that I am irredeemable, or because again, shame tells us that we can never be better, and so I think learning how to recognize it and name it for what it is helps you to be able to move forward beyond that, and I love what you said when you're like, hello, old friend. You can't sit here. Like, you are no longer welcome at the table. But I think when we start to feel it, don't let that pile more shame where we're like, oh my God, I'm feeling shame again, but I think going, okay, I don't like this. This is shame. So how can I move forward out of the shame and still be held accountable, still make amends for what I did, but know that that has nothing to do with who I am as a person.
Yeah.
You know, and not attaching our behavior to our personhood and our belovedness and our belonging.
I think the more that I have come to understand it and like feeling it, I don't know, it's just the bounce back of just like is so like I don't know.
Do you feel like you bounce back quicker from it now than you used to?
Like I'm just able to be like, oh, okay. You know, say I did something. And at this point, I don't know, like I haven't felt shame in a really long time.
Yeah.
Like I've felt it off of other people or like they're experiencing it, and that's like kind of like even weird now where I'm just like,
yeah,
it's fine. Not it's fine. Like I'm, you know, like let guilt check you and then move on.
Make
like,
it right and move on and live your life and don't let it swallow you whole.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But as for myself personally, like I'm just like, if there's something that I don't like how I acted or like how I said something, you know, like I'm able to just say, okay, I didn't love that, you know, and how can I do that differently next time as opposed to, God, like I'm so screwed up, like I'm awful, you know, like that doesn't even cross my mind anymore, really.
Which is so great because like it is such a difficult thing to move through. Yeah. You know, I think it can have such a hold on us but once we can move to the other side, like you said, then when you experience it, like I remember that I was sitting in a car on the phone with Dan when I was having those like immense feelings of shame, and it was almost like I was so disoriented because I hadn't experienced it to that degree in so long. And then once I was able to name it for what it was, all the feelings didn't go away immediately. No. I still, for the rest of that evening and for a couple days after, was still having to like really battle it in my mind of like, you know, reminding myself, you know, all the positive affirmations and like, you know, you are loved, you know, as many times as I had to say it to myself. But it was like, but again, like you said, I moved through it so much quicker than I used to. And it is a really good feeling when you feel it and go, whoa, I haven't felt this in a really long time, to go, oh, it is possible for us to be able to be free from it, you know, and not spend our whole life just stuck in that shame cycle, you know?
Yeah. And it's definitely a process. Like it wasn't something that I didn't just like wake up one day and was like, I'm free from shame. Like, it's really getting to know yourself, believing that God is love, and that's like where it started, but it's been years, you know.
Yeah. Well, do you have any closing or final thoughts for the wonderful people out there?
Hey, YouTube.
For all of our fans. No, I'm just kidding.
Just kidding, sorry.
Just kidding.
We're at church. If you feel like you're in that cycle of shame, do the work to get out, because it's real great on the other side. And I know that's easier said than done, because it is a process of like whether you have to let go of thought processes that you have that are toxic, or your belief of God is I won't say skewed because it's your belief, but you are loved, you are worthy, you know, you do deserve to be in connection with other people, and you can't have the fullness of those things while also carrying shame. So I would say, if you feel those things, disconnected, unloved, unworthy, then see what you need to let go of, because God's not asking you to carry that. So
it's so true. And sometimes you need the help of a therapist or a counselor or just a trusted friend, you know, that you
all
can...
of the above for me.
Yeah, all of it. All of it. Yeah, everything. And whatever your spiritual practices look like, you know, sometimes meditation and prayer or whatever it is, you know, can help. And yeah, I just think it's worth it. It's worth it to move through it. And we've got to, you know, because if shame it will destroy you internally. You will not live into the fullness of who you are, and you will not embrace your full humanity, you know, when we are bound by shame.
Yeah, and just another side thing. Yeah. You also don't get to enjoy the people around you when you view life through the lens of shame.
Yeah.
I enjoy people much more. Like, I'm still an introvert. I don't necessarily love being around people.
Same.
But I don't spend my days like judging what people are doing, because it's not, you know.
That's so good, because I think, like, I just made that connection in my brain, like, when you said that, of like, yeah, I used to have such a judgmental, like, I would look at people and externally, you know, I was like, oh, you're so great. But like internally, I was constantly judging the actions of other people and like what they were doing and how they were living their life. Yeah. And now that I, like, when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, of course I did. Because I was so consumed and bound by shame that how else, like, if you live in shame and you think that you are terrible and horrible all the time, like you said, your natural response is to like bring other people into that. So yeah, it was like I wasn't able to affirm the fullness of everyone else's humanity, because I was so bound by shame that all I was doing was spent so much time in judgment.
Yeah. Almost like keeping like a tally score of like, okay, well, I have 5, but they have 6, so maybe God might love me.
Yeah.
You know, more, you know, because
it's like I did this, but did you see what she did? You know, where it's like you have to do that when you live in shame. You have to find a way to make yourself feel like you're not as bad, and so you're hyper aware of the behaviors and the things in other people that you would look at and deem as unacceptable. Shame makes you like hyper aware of those things. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Whew. So true.
We ain't got time for it.
No time. If we want to live our life, we do not have time to stay bound by shame, for sure. Okay, well, thank you for this conversation. It was fantastic. And thank you all for, you know, bearing with us today and joining us for this conversation. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Love ya.
Love ya.
Love ya. Hey guys.
Hey.
On today's YouTube.
What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel.
We're going to teach you how to make bread.
Smash that like button. Leave us a comment
at the top.
We're the Shame Sisters.
Sisters. Tell me more about shame.
You're like, can I sit like this?
It's like, I'm just gonna move every time you ask me a question.
Until you end up doing a full 360.
Shame sisters.
Shame sisters. Oh my gosh. I had no idea. Dan totally secretly did that without me knowing, so that, oh my gosh. Sorry you all had to be subjected to that. Like, did that kill the moment? Did that kill the seriousness of the shame convo? I don't know. Anyway. What can I say? We have a lot of fun. So, you know, I really did love that conversation, and I have been just captivated by everyone's comments, and everything everyone is saying is just so good. You know, I think it's clear by the comments too that like obviously we all deal with shame, and it is so destructive, and we all deal with it in different ways. And I would be remiss if I didn't also talk about, and some people mentioned it in the comments, but the ways in which people from marginalized communities carry the weight of shame. It's like shame on top of shame, for our LGBTQ siblings, for Black folks, for other people of color, the ways in which shame is compiled in their lives in just such a profound way. And it's just something that is, it can really destroy us and really keep us bound. And so, we just wanted to have that conversation just to kind of share our lived experience and to hopefully spark just some thoughts and some other conversation for all of you. And just that we would remember just to continue, naming shame for what it is and continue that fight to eliminate it from our lives, because like Nicole said, it's like, you can't sit here. You are not welcome here at the table. Shame is not welcome at our table. And so, Jenny just said, she's like, we could do several messages focusing on men, LGBTQ folks, et cetera. Absolutely. I even leaned over to Dan during it, and I was like, gosh, I feel like we should do like a part 2, part 3, and highlight other people's lived experiences. And we very well may do that, because I think it could be a really great conversation. But we only have about 5 minutes here until this is going to cut me off, I think. So just to kind of give you guys some resources along with this. So Brene Brown she's a fantastic leader in this space around shame and vulnerability and that kind of thing. And so really we linked her podcast in the chat. I think we got it on Facebook too. That's a specific episode of her podcast where she talks specifically about shame and accountability, and it's really good. She also has a section in her book, Daring. Oh, look, the green screen is making it look weird because the letters are in green. But Daring Greatly, she has a whole section in this book around shame and the damaging effects of it. And so I highly recommend that. And then she also has a podcast episode with Tarana Burke, Tarana Burke is she's a Black woman. She is the founder of the Me Too movement, and they have a really great conversation on the podcast. But they collaborated together and wrote this, You Are Your Best Thing. But it's full of a lot of stories of the Black experience. So for all of for all the Black folks watching today, it's really good because it kind of, it talks about the ways in which for Black folks, shame and vulnerability carries an extra damaging effect and an extra risk. And so just for all of you that are interested, I've started reading this and it's fantastic. And so this is another really great resource around that. And so, I just wanted to share those resources with you. And, I'm really grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for all of your perspectives and your thoughts in the chat. And, to kind of end, last week we talked about 1 John chapter 4, and there's just one kind of end thing that I want to leave you with. But, when we were talking about shame and fear are kind of co-conspirators together. Wherever you find shame, you're going to find fear. And in 1 John 4:18, it says this. It says, love will never invoke fear. Perfect love expels fear. And in some translations, it says, there is no fear in love, that perfect love casts out all fear. And so I just want to remind all of us today that that when we know that we are loved and that that is the foundation from which everything else flows, that love casts out all fear, therefore breaks that cycle of shame. When we live in love and we know our belovedness and we fully affirm the belovedness of every other human being, shame is unable to thrive and survive in that kind of environment that's full of love. So everyone today, just go about your day and know that you are loved and continue having conversations, naming the shame so that you can move beyond it. And yeah, that's it. eKids service is coming up next. It's going to start at about 10:50. We pushed it back a little bit since today went a little long. But thank you all so much for being here today. I hope you have a fantastic Sunday. Just a couple of really quick announcements as we're wrapping up. We have our next in-person gathering next Sunday at Greg Clark Park. Online community, there will still be a simultaneous online experience next week at 9:30. But for everyone in the area, we're going to meet at Greg Clark Park. We're asking everyone to bring a brunch or breakfast item to share. So whether that's donuts or breakfast tacos or fruit or whatever, Icon will provide coffee, water, and juice. But we'd love to see you all at Greg Clark Park next week at 9:30. And then lastly, we are on the 4th of July. We are not going to be having service on the 4th of July. We decided that we're going to go ahead and give everyone that Sunday off to spend time with your family. So July 4th, there will be no church. And then one thing we want to let you know about is that next Saturday on June 26th, starting at 5 p.m., there is a local restaurant and kind of a bar, coffee shop restaurant thing here in San Marcos called the Davenport, and they are actually doing a fundraiser next Saturday evening that all the proceeds are going to go to the Bobcat Pride Scholarship Fund, which is a Texas state organization that supports LGBTQ young adults who are experiencing an unforeseen financial crisis. And they have helped and supported over 60 LGBTQ individuals with medical emergencies, immigration requirements, unexpected loss of jobs, and so on. And so next Saturday, if you're free, we'd love to have you there. They're having a market days out there with some vendors. And if you are unable to make it, and if you want to give to that organization, we set up on our iconchurch.com/give page, there is a drop down that says Bobcat Pride, and you can give to that organization so that we can financially help to support LGBTQ folks in our area who have fallen on some hard times. So that is it. That is all the announcements. And I'm so glad that you were all here today. And we will see you next Sunday, either online or at Greg Clark Park. Have a fantastic Sunday, everyone.